Welcome to The Critique. Today we are reviewing a highly detailed, passionate script that analyzes the rhetoric surrounding the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Right, specifically dissecting the conspiracy theories, the organizational power struggles at Turning Point USA, and the allegations directed at his widow, Erika Kirk.
Exact. It's a deeply researched piece of investigative commentary, but we need to pivot immediately to the feedback to see how we can refine its presentation to maximize its impact.
Yeah, let's jump right into it.
So, a key theme running through this material seems to be the rigorous tracking of the opposing speaker's rhetorical habit.
Which is super effective when it works.
Oh, absolutely. Like, we see this incredibly sharp observation early on where you, the author, point out that the subject uses the word Israel 5 times in just 15 seconds.
Wow, yeah.
Right. You lay out exactly how she weaponizes it as this, manipulative filler word to plant seeds in the audience's mind. It's a very sharp editorial catch.
That's clearly laid out. I wonder, though, if we've considered whether your own use of nicknames throughout the script might be backfiring and, actively undercutting that exact kind of brilliant observation.
The excessive use of derogatory nicknames and exaggerated pronunciations undermines the authoritative credibility of the piece and distracts from its core analytical strengths.
Yeah, I kept snagging on this while reading.
Same here.
When we look at the mechanics of this text, the core weakness is really how the script continuously shifts the target's moniker.
It's all over the place.
Right. You don't just pick one name for your subject. We're hit with this barrage of variations. We see Candace Sloan.
Slow-ins, transness.
Yeah, transness and damnedest just rotating constantly. And it goes beyond just the names, too.
Right, the spellings.
Exactly. The text relies on these stylized phonetic spellings, specifically rendering the word Jews as Joos.
Which, you actually noted yourself in the vernacular feedback section of the source. You flagged it as something that might be highly distracting.
And honestly, it really is.
There's this concept in writing we can call the credibility paradox, right?
Uh-huh.
The harder you try to make your subject look ridiculous through insults, the more ridiculous your own argument starts to look to the reader.
But let me push back on that for a second.
Sure.
If I'm the author and I'm writing for a specific, highly partisan audience that expects a certain level of, red meat and satire, doesn't adopting a cold, clinical tone risk alienating my core readers? Why shouldn't I call her Candace?
Because it completely changes the atmosphere of your argument.
Right.
When you rely on stylized spellings and rotating insults, the script stops sounding like a rigorous, objective teardown and starts sounding like a personal, petty grievance.
Yeah, it feels reactive.
Exactly. You've done the hard investigative labor. You compiled factual rebuttals regarding Tyler Robinson's alibis.
You dismantle the vehicle hoax.
Right, and you track the Fed's location data. But all of that is weakened because the delivery mechanism feels so reactive. The reader is basically forced to process your insult before they can process the actual evidence.
It's cognitive friction.
Yes.
Every single time they read transness, their brain has to pause, decode the insult, decide if they find it funny or distracting, and only then do they get to the IP address data you're presenting.
Exactly. So the suggestion here is to streamline the nomenclature and standardize the pronunciation to maintain a sharp, investigative tone that keeps the audience anchored entirely on the weight of the evidence.
We want the facts to do the heavy lifting, not the adjectives.
Right.
Let's look at some concrete examples of how to implement this. The most devastating approach you could take is to refer to the subject strictly by her surname, just Owens.
Oh, yeah, that's so much stronger.
Right? Using just the surname builds a colder, much more authoritative, factual takedown. Psychologically, it says to your reader, I don't need to insult this person because the evidence of their manipulation is damning enough.
It builds an ethos of restraint. You're letting the subject's own actions hang them. And, restraint is really the ultimate flex of authority in investigative journalism.
Precisely. Now, alternatively, if you feel that a satirical edge is absolutely required for your specific brand, the concrete adjustment is to select just one carefully chosen moniker and use it consistently throughout the entire piece.
Pick your weapon and stick with it.
Exactly. Do not introduce a new insult in every single paragraph. It exhausts the reader. Furthermore, and this is crucial, you need to ensure that you are delivering the word Jews with standard, conventional pronunciation.
Why is that distinction so important mechanically?
Because by doing that, your critique of the subject's anti-Semitic dog whistles remains the focal point of the argument.
Ah, right.
If you pronounce it strangely, your own bizarre vocal delivery steals the spotlight. The listener ends up analyzing your performance instead of the subject's bigotry.
That makes a lot of sense. When you constantly use petty nicknames, you drain your own authority. But once you remove the distraction of those nicknames, your audience is suddenly ready to look closely at your evidence.
Yeah.
But establishing a serious, investigative atmosphere means you have a responsibility to ensure your core evidence isn't suddenly buried under something else.
Right, you have to protect the evidence.
The material makes a strong case for organizational manipulation by highlighting the fascinating timeline regarding George Farmer.
The 17 to 18-day engagement.
Yes, the script maps out that engagement, a rapid marriage to a complete stranger, and then his installation as Turning Point UK chairman just 2 months later.
It is highly grounded, verifiable stuff.
It really is. But I have to admit, mixing this incredibly concrete Discord IP investigation with claims of demonic seances felt like a prosecutor bringing a Ouija board to a homicide trial.
Wow.
It completely distracts the jury from the actual fingerprints on the weapon.
Is there a risk that focusing solely on spiritual warfare might overlook the grounded conspiracy investigation involving Dan Bongino and Kash Patel?
The heavy integration of spiritual warfare themes significantly dilutes the impact of the tangible, investigatory questions raised about organizational power dynamics.
The central weakness in this section of the script is the severe genre whiplash the reader experiences.
Oh, totally.
Think about the pacing and the mechanics of an investigative thriller. You build incredible tension pivoting from highly verifiable claims, like Charlie Kirk's actual letter to Bibi Netanyahu, or the granular details of Tyler Robinson's Discord server history.
The audience is locked in at that point.
Right, you're making a promise to the reader that you're going to show them the hidden factual connections. But then in the very next breath, the text veers deeply into extensive claims about literal seances.
Yeah, you assert that the target is kneeling to be possessed by demonic entity.
And you detail the devil's specific plot to stop Frank Turk's Christian apologetics.
It's like hitting a brick wall at 60 miles an hour. The momentum of the investigative narrative is completely lost.
Because you're forcing the reader to shift from analyzing digital footprints to contemplating the spiritual ignorance of Satan.
Right.
You're asking the audience to evaluate two completely different evidentiary standards simultaneously. You can prove a timeline of a corporate board takeover using dates and documents.
But you cannot prove that a rival is acting specifically because a demonic principality misunderstood a biblical prophecy.
Exactly.
But let me play devil's advocate here, no pun intended.
Sure.
What if the author genuinely believes this is a spiritual war? Are we asking them to censor their own theological worldview just to make the text read more like a conventional true crime script?
Not at all. We aren't telling you to abandon your worldview. We're talking about structural integration. Bifurcation.
The actionable suggestion here is to bifurcate the theological commentary from the hard-hitting investigative analysis so the concrete organizational timeline doesn't get lost in metaphysical speculation.
Yes, separation is key. You can keep the theology, but you need to manage how it is structurally deployed.
How so?
A concrete example of how to execute this is to frame the spiritual warfare elements as a thematic bookend. You place the theological framing strictly in the introduction and the conclusion of the piece.
Oh, I like that.
Use the introduction to establish the spiritual worldview as the ultimate stakes of the conflict. Then leave the entire body of the script fully focused on human motives and tangible actions.
So the theology becomes the lens through which we view the conflict, rather than the literal, mechanical plot itself.
Exactly. For instance, you should concretely frame George Farmer and Candace Owens' motives purely around the pragmatic human power vacuum at Turning Point USA, following the tragedy.
Write your body paragraphs focusing heavily on Blexit's absorption into the parent company.
Right, the loss of operational control, the suspicious Discord links, and the massive financial incentives.
Treat the spiritual war as the ideological backdrop.
Because when you present demonic possession as the literal daily mechanism driving the suspect's actions, it actually makes the suspect seem less culpable.
Wait, how?
Because it removes their human agency and their greed from the equation.
Oh, wow. That's a great point. And when you pull the literal demons out of the driving seat, the antagonist's motives suddenly look incredibly human.
Yeah.
And nothing is more human than a power struggle. Which naturally leads us to look at how the script treats the current obstacle to that power. Erika Kirk, let's look closely at the section discussing the allegations against the widow.
Right, let's get into that.
You claim that the intense attacks on Erika Kirk stem fundamentally from jealousy over her, quote, Holy Spirit, blonde hair, and blue eyes.
Yeah.
I have to say, when I read that, it felt like a massive missed opportunity to discuss Turning Point's actual institutional infrastructure.
That makes sense. But could the evidence also support a different conclusion, like the idea that institutional leverage is a far more compelling motive than personal envy?
Relying on personal jealousy as the primary motive for the attacks on Erika Kirk overlooks a much stronger, original opportunity to analyze the institutional power struggle at play.
The weakness here is that asserting the antagonist targets Erika mainly due to petty envy over physical traits and perceived spiritual standing is incredibly reductive.
It really is.
It shrinks the scale of your narrative. Honestly, it undercuts your own highly sophisticated argument established earlier in the text.
Right. Earlier, you brilliantly outlined Blexit's forced integration into TPUSA.
Yeah.
You detail the target's deep frustration over losing operational control while basically just collecting a figurehead check.
And the massive corporate resentment that brewed from that dynamic.
Exactly.
You set up this incredibly complex Machiavellian corporate maneuvering.
And then to reduce the climax of that conflict down to she's mad because Erika has blonde hair?
It's jarring. Frankly, it strips the antagonist of their strategic agency. It turns a multi-million-dollar institutional proxy war into a high school cafeteria drama.
But wait, isn't jealousy a highly relatable human emotion?
Sure.
If the author believes the antagonist really is just that petty and superficial, why shouldn't they highlight it? Doesn't it expose the antagonist's shallow nature?
Even if she is that petty, framing the climax of your investigation around her superficiality strips the weight from everything you built.
It lowers the stake.
It makes the stakes feel small. If she's just jealous, she's a mean girl. But is she systematically trying to dismantle Erika Kirk's legitimacy to seize control of a massive political apparatus?
Now she's a dangerous institutional threat.
Exactly.
The suggestion, then, is to elevate the angle by focusing the narrative strictly on the structural, financial, and institutional threat that Erika Kirk poses to the opposing faction's ambitions within the organization.
Precisely. You need to upgrade the motive to match the stakes of the investigation.
What does that look like practically?
Let's look at concrete examples of how to rewrite this. You need to highlight how Erika currently holds the literal keys to the kingdom post-assassination.
Right.
The script should detail exactly how her inheritance of Charlie's influence, her legal standing, or her voting power on the board directly blocks the opposing faction from capitalizing on the institutional void left by his death.
It's about leverage, not looks.
It is all about leverage. Another concrete adjustment is how you frame the specific public accusations against Erika.
Like what?
You mentioned the opposing faction complaining about Erika selling hats or laughing at emoji just 6 days after the tragedy.
Right.
Instead of framing those attacks as symptoms of a jealous woman lashing out, reframe those attacks as calculated, strategic operations to delegitimize Erika's leadership.
How does that work mechanically in the writing?
You explain the tactic of weaponizing optics. The antagonist doesn't actually care about how Erika processes grief.
They're just using it.
Right. The antagonist is weaponizing the optics of that grief to destabilize Erika's public support, with the ultimate goal of forcing a vote of no confidence from the TPUSA board.
Wow.
When you explain the why behind the attacks in structural terms, you elevate the script from a gossip column into a high-stakes corporate and political thriller.
When you synthesize these three adjustments together, the entire piece tightens into a truly formidable investigation.
It really does.
Let's briefly recap the core issues we've explored today. First, there is a critical need to standardize your tone by eliminating the shifting, derogatory nicknames and phonetic spellings to preserve your investigative authority. Let the evidence do the insulting.
Exactly.
Second, it is absolutely necessary to untangle the metaphysical tangents from the concrete timeline, specifically regarding George Farmer and Turning Point UK, so your hard facts aren't lost in genre whiplash.
Keep them separate.
And third, there is a massive opportunity to elevate the core motive behind the attacks on Erika Kirk, moving away from reductive personal jealousy and focusing instead on a high-stakes institutional power struggle.
And to make those changes actionable, You just need to execute a few structural shifts on the page. Choose one consistent naming convention, ideally just the surname Owens, and stick to it.
Right.
Group your theological commentary into a thematic bookend at the start and end of the piece, rather than mixing it sentence by sentence with the Discord IP evidence in the body paragraphs.
Yeah, keep the body focused.
And finally, rewrite that Erika Kirk section to focus entirely on her structural leverage over Blexit and TPUSA, framing the attacks on her as calculated corporate warfare rather than petty envy over blonde hair.
We want to thank you for submitting such a compelling, passionate, and deeply researched piece of work.
It was a fascinating read.
We highly encourage you to apply these structural and stylistic edits to the text and submit the revised material back to the critique for further review. We would love to see how this evolves.
Yes, please send it back in.
Remember, when you're building a case this complex, your evidence is the absolute star of the show. So don't let the carnival mirrors distract your readers from the fingerprints you've worked so hard to uncover.